welcome back to my build of the Strike Freedom Gundam. I'm still working on the torso here, and you'll see that I've got the cockpit and skeleton for the torso mostly finished here. So I'm about to start working on actually applying the outer armor plates. So one of the more interesting things about being here in China working on Gunpla is that it's commonly considered something for kids, and there aren't really a lot of adults that do it. So for kids, when they discover that you work on doing something like Gunpla, that you enjoy Gundam, the reaction is, wow, that's so cool. But a lot of adults will think, but that's for kids. Also, you'll find that, especially something like an MG, which can take a lot of time. In fact, at this point, this was the first day I had spent on it, but when they take a lot of time, an MG can take several hours, and you don't have a lot of time all at once. You find yourself coming and going, and then or doing them when you have a little bit of vacation time. And that can happen a few times a year, especially around the time of Spring Festival or the Lunar New Year, which is usually in January or February. And you find yourself with at least a week or sometimes 2 weeks off. This is a really great way to fill some of the time, to keep yourself busy, and just to have a little bit of fun. So what I'm actually putting together here are the shoulder joints, where the arms will actually socket into the torso. So one of the things that's nice about my knife is that my blades have a scraper on the back of the blade, and that's really nice because when you try to use the blade itself, the cutting edge, to shave really close to the part, to shave that nub off, you have to be very careful. And you're going to use it to get it relatively close, but that shaver, that scraper on the back, really helps to get the part smooth without as much danger of creating a divot in the part itself, which is always something you want to avoid. So for me, what I do is I always make sure my blade is flush to the part, and I don't try to take the nub off all at once. I take it off little by little by little, which can take a little bit of time, of course, but it's much better in the long run. As you have a much cleaner part, you're less likely to distress the plastic, and you don't have to do as much with the scraper. Now, of course, if you have one, actually having a proper scraper that is a separate tool is going to be stronger. It's going to be more reliable. And so that's going to do a better job of scraping and leveling and smoothing the plastic. But if you don't have that, having a craft knife that has that on the back of the blade does go a long way toward making your life a little bit easier and making your model a little bit nicer as well. And there we are. That is the full skeletal proper, and as you can see, I've gotten a different sprue. This one's not gold, and I'm going to start putting in some of the actual armor plates. So the one I'm working on right here is the waist of the torso, the lower abdomen. It's blue, so it'll offset nicely with the gold and the other colors that I'm using here. So you can see me grabbing that paint pen. I've actually got a small white piece in the back of, right in the small of the back. And what I've done is I've taken that piece and I've just made it a little bit of green, given it a little bit of green. But with some time and the way it dried, it wasn't quite as even coloring as I liked. So as I'm going back periodically and kind of touching it up a little bit to even out the color of that. Again, it is important not to try and go too fast. It can be very tempting, especially if you just want to have that cool finished product, to hurry, to rush. But you'll find that if you rush, your end product is not going to look anywhere near as nice, and you're not going to be as well pleased with it. So again, take your time, go slow, and you'll find that that will give you a much better end product than if you try and rush, if you try and go really, really fast and just get it done. So one of the things that I've found that sets the MG off from an HG, and again, this is the first MG I've done, but certainly one of the things that sets it apart from the HGs is the little details. On an HG, these small parts that I'm putting in right now, these details, would likely have been actually molded and sculpted into the chest piece along with the other. They're not that big a difference in color, and it just would have been much easier at an HG level to have it all be one piece. But again, having that little bit of distinct color, that little bit of separation to the part helps add some detail and helps add some definition. So as I continue with this build, I am doing some repaints, and primarily what I'm doing is repainting some of the white pieces green. But I'm also leaving some of them white, and I've got a little bit of a master plan in mind with what I paint and what I leave white. And going along with that, this particular white piece, which is, again, it's part of the lower abdomen, going down into the waist, was one that I definitely wanted to leave white as is. Again, I am doing a little bit of touch up on that piece in the back just to make sure it's even, to make sure it's fully covered where I want it. Occasionally you will find that you want to brush off a little bit of the shavings and whatnot from your knife, and if you're going to do that, just make sure, of course, that you brush them off in such a way that you're not going to cut yourself. And of course, the simplest way to do that is to brush from the back edge of the knife toward the blade, and then of course off. Don't run along the blade, and of course don't brush towards the blade. You're going to cut yourself if you do that. Sometimes I will brush it off with just my thumb, and sometimes I'll use my fingers to either side of the blade and do it that way. Depends on whether I have one hand available, if I have something in my other hand or not. So here we're actually moving on to the cockpit, and the cockpit is certainly one of the more interesting elements of the torso. Of course, we do have that pilot inside, and the cockpit is able to open and shut, and that's a very interesting feature on the MG that you do not have on the HD models. And there it is, the fully attached cockpit. One final piece that I had almost forgotten, actually skipped over in the instructions when I attached the chest plate, was this little piece of gold that goes right in the abdomen. And there it is. There's the completed torso piece. Give you guys all a look and see that the cockpit snicks open and shut. And that's the torso. I hope you enjoyed it, and